Welcome to the Barcelona Podcast, episode 141. Unmissable opinions brought to you by the most influential voices in the FC Barcelona community. I'm Dan Hilton, and as Barcelona finish out their season, it seems to be a little bit of a grind, so I need his help again. You know, we heard him 2 weeks ago, but you also heard him for about the first 9.5, 10 months or more. What was it, Francesc? I don't know. How long were you here?
Too long, man. Too long. Clearly, the listeners had enough of me, but unfortunately, they've got me back again. Guys, it's great to be here again. Thank you, Dan, for all the hard work continuing, but absolutely a pleasure to come back, even though results haven't been great at the European stage. But we're here again.
Well, yeah, now I have my mentions all flooded with Francesc. We didn't want you to leave. We actually wanted the U.S.-based Joe Schmo to leave, but thanks for that. But today, we actually are talking about somebody leaving something, and the focus of today's show, even though we're pulling all from our listener questions for La Ronda, it's does Valverde's job depend on the Copa del Rey? That's going to be the main focus here, and we're going to start with a bunch of questions in La Ronda about Ernesto Valverde. This is, again, before the Copa del Rey final. From Roy, do you think the board supporting Valverde is just a way to not cause tension prior to the Copa del Rey final?
Oh, of course, without a doubt. I am certain that Bartomeu is far more conservative than what people want him to be. When I say people, I tend to sort of signal and make reference to the people that have started following Barca over the last 5, 10, 15 years, and all they have seen is Barca winning. I do know that Barcelona under Guardiola brought a lot of fans to the show, and that is a positive, you know. Then obviously under Luis Enrique, more people came, mainly because of the MSN influence, and minus Neymar, we've continued to win with Valverde, and I think that the fact that Barca is a winning club has brought a lot of people. Like, I do see it here in Qatar. A lot of my students actually wear Manchester City tops because Guardiola is now there, and they seem to be winning. So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of people attracting, a lot of new fans being attracted to the winning of Barca. This new fan base, that haven't experienced the history of Barca before we were a winning club, seem to have a very sort of short-term memory. They just want Barca to win every single time. And they, you know, when Valverde isn't playing the beautiful football that Guardiola's team used to play, they just want him gone, you know. And while some part of me does understand that, and I need to be a little bit more conservative. I tend to be anyway. Maybe it's the fact that I'm a little bit old. I've been following the club for, nearly 40 years now. And I think we need to put everything into perspective. You know, I think that Bartomeu knows that winning La Liga, as Zidane himself said in the recent press conference, winning La Liga is the most important title of the year. That is the one that actually tells you whether the team is as good as it needs to be for the season, and that is target number one. Obviously, this year was different because the whole team, and Messi said it himself in the summer, you know, La Copa Linda, the beautiful cup, it was geared up towards winning the Champions League, and that did not happen. So, you know, the Copa del Rey is a title that comes at the end of the year. As I said in the previous podcast, which I strongly recommend listeners, if you haven't, go back to previous episodes and listen to those as well. I mean, Diana was genius last week, and hopefully I was a little bit all right after the Liverpool as well. But what I'm trying to say is that, you know, the Liverpool debacle will be in people's heads forever, but the Copa del Rey is the cherry on top at the end of the season, and if he does win it, that will make the season a little bit more bearable. However, I'm not sure it is enough to keep him in the job.
Yeah, I'm going to plug the YouTube video I'm currently working on. Not sure when that's going to come out. Probably not today, but maybe tomorrow being Thursday or Friday, depending on when you're listening to this. And that's all about the history of the Copa del Rey. And in that research, I found that, you know, there were times when, particularly when Real Madrid were at their strongest, Barca only won 4 Copa del Reys in the 60s and 70s combined. You know, Johan Cruyff even, he won 1 Copa del Rey title as a player and 1 as a manager. So for all the dream team we talk about, yes, he did win 4 straight La Ligas, but the Copa del Rey was still a competition that Barcelona were lucky to win because of all the competition that existed in it. I mean, if looking back at the history even of the Copa, that is Athletic Bilbao's competition and Real Madrid's competition as much as is Barcelona. They just happen to, that being La Blaugrana, they happen to have won the most over time, and a big help to that is the last 4 years of straight titles of dominance that they've had. And so for Valverde, whether or not the Copa final would be his last gasp, I think that's already decided behind the scenes, and I think this goes back to Roy's question about not causing tension. Even if he's leaving, I think that decision is already made, and I think if he's not, I don't know if the Copa del Rey final, unless there is a grand insurgency of frustration coming from people very close to the club. Now, I mean, obviously, us keyboard warriors, thousands of miles away. Now, Francesc, you're thousands of miles away as well in Qatar, but, we can complain about Valverde as much as we want, and that's not going to enact any change. But, if the people that truly matter say they want him out, then he's out, and vice versa. But I think if he survived, what happened in Liverpool, and that's not already decided behind the scenes, if that makes sense, if that's not already decided behind the scenes that he would survive Liverpool, I don't see how either way in the Copa del Rey final this winds up being the last gasp for him. And people said if the locker room supports him, and in particular if Messi supports him, then that's really the only thing he needs. But there could be other options out there as well. And I think we'll have to see after the Copa final, which Douglas asked, with all the injuries, what lineup do you think will Valverde use for the Copa final? And I think it's either Artur comes back or Coutinho comes back if they're healthy. But if not, it looks like it's going to be the exact same lineup we saw against Eibar, with probably Malcolm and Roberto in the front three with Messi as a false nine. And then Artur would come back in midfield potentially. Maybe they play a 4-4-2 if Artur is healthy, but I'm not sure, because that's a lot of attacking onus then on Malcolm, then there's no way they're playing a 4-4-2 with Roberto up top. So I think that's actually Valverde's in a bad way with his lineup. I think it's going to be a tough decision, but it might be the only decisions he has to make.
Yeah, ultimately, I think it doesn't quite matter what team Barca actually plays. Man for man, Barca is a far better team than Valencia are. Even without Suarez, even without Dembele, even with the doubt of Coutinho, Barca are a better team. And it has been proven over the last 2 years, because domestically Barca have been perfect. The problem is, and it's going back to your original question, is whether that is enough for the current board to keep Valverde. And based on what I was saying earlier, I think it probably is. Bartomeu is conservative and has got sort of the background, follows Rosell, and, you can rewind even more years, follows the Josep Luis Núñez philosophy, the same school of thought that winning domestically is enough and everything else is a bonus. Of course, I totally agree with you. The Copa del Rey is and would be a bonus if it was won. It seems to be that obviously in the last 4 or 5 years, Barca have won it every time, and people are used to it. But actually, it's quite an achievement to do. And if you ask any Real Madrid fans, they would have liked to win that certainly this year, but even in the previous years when they were winning Champions League as well. So you cannot underestimate the power of winning La Liga or a domestic double if the Copa was won. But it goes back to the very same point: is do we want a team that will be able to challenge for European glory next year? And if we do, which I think we should do, then Valverde shouldn't really stay, because he's had 2 seasons in which, you cannot really ask the guy to do more in La Liga. I think his second year, particularly, when we went to Roma, you could say he wasn't rotating enough. You can say the players were tired when they went to Roma, and it was a fiasco. It was a misunderstanding, and it was an accident. This second season, after everything he's done, he was rotating fairly well. Of course, Dembele was injured, especially towards the second leg. But he had more than enough players. The investment was heavy in the summer. People like Lenglet or Artur that we thought were going to be playing a much more secondary role actually became protagonists. And I think it's unexcusable, And of course, I am fairly certain that if Valverde stays with the support of the players, with the young coming, maybe the league comes as well, and a couple of additions here and there to add depth. Maybe Felipe Luis comes as a backup for Jordi Alba. I'm not sure, but I think that the La Liga could be won again, especially in the shape that Madrid are, and the fact that they are in a way, as you say, in the United States, rebuilding. Mm-hmm. But is that enough? I don't think. For me, it is. I know for the vast majority of the sort of last 10, 15 years, newly comers sort of fan base, it's definitely not good for them either, with the hashtag Valverde out that seems to be hitting social media every 2 seconds. But I think even for the most conservative sort of long life Barca fans, there needs to be a change. Whether the board is brave enough to do it, I'm just not sure. And whether there is a candidate out there that is ready today, I'm not sure either. So that may mean we've got Valverde for another year. But I want it to be fairly clear and absolutely clear for everyone listening. I would replace Valverde with a better option. I'm just not sure who the option should be. But then again, that is the role that people at the club should be having.
Yeah, and I think, this isn't in defense of Valverde, because his failures in Anfield or at Anfield, and then in Roma last year, those two matches, they were there is blame, there is fault, there is hurt, there is all this tension and issues that were shown by the club. The one defense I have already for all of that is, while Messi did say Champions League is the most important thing, you look at that Champions League final, and this is not a disservice to Tottenham. They deserve to get there. They beat the teams they did. They got over Ajax. They had a miraculous last-minute goal. But that's the whole thing about narrative that's frustrating about the Champions League. That's why people watch it, though, and that's why people care about it so much, is because every team, in essence, I know it seems like it's the same teams. And yes, Real Madrid have, won the last three, but anybody in theory can win the Champions League. The fact that Tottenham, who has been the fourth best team in England and the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th best team in, you'd say, world football week in and week out, and they're in the Champions League final, because the Champions League final is not the two best teams. And I think Liverpool has deserved to be there. They have been one of the top three teams. So as we kind of said, Liverpool against Barcelona felt like that was actually a Champions League final as much as it was a semifinal. Again, not a disservice to Ajax, who got by Juventus and Real Madrid. But again, this year it really is. It's what they, it's another American term, but it's a crapshoot. It is. There's a lot of luck involved, seemingly, to win the Champions League, and so that's why the trouble is so hard, because the league is about the best season by the best Spanish team over the course of an entire year, and that's what Barcelona have been now. 8 of the last 11 seasons, and Barcelona have been that, even in the Copa del Rey, where it's, again, that's a knockout tournament, but they've just been the superior Spanish sides. And I think that brings to the point about replacing him, that there being so few options, because they have to figure out a way that, we're going to get to this in a second, but Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid, I think, are going to be, as you said, rebuilding and retooling more than even Barca is. I think Barca of the three is going to be doing the least. But if they bring in a new manager, in the way that Atletico and Real Madrid are expected to keep Simeone and Zidane, that would change things for Barca quite a bit. And especially if it's a guy that Ellie says, Quique Setien just left Betis. Is this a coincidence, or is he our next coach and Bartomeu is playing coy until after the Copa del Rey? Would you want him over Valverde? We actually went back when these rumors originally surfaced months and months ago. You just type in Quique Setien on Barca blog, and you can actually listen to, breaking down his managerial history and all that stuff that we've gotten into before. But at this point, Francesc, Betis, they finish not where they want to, and it wasn't so much the players or the board or even results, because Quique Setien, he overtook Real Madrid, he overtook Barcelona, he overtook Atletico Madrid. He had some big wins under his belt, but he also failed to be consistent. And Betis at times were just possessing for possession's sake, and I think that's why the fans completely revolted, in the way that the fans have basically completely revolted and they call Valverde boring. It's the same thing.
Yeah. I get that, but Betis, with all due respect, and a lot of my family, actually, from my mom's side, are from Sevilla, Huelva, and southern Spain. So Betis actually is a very close to my heart, put it that way. They don't have the depth in squad. They don't have the budget. They don't have the history. The history is varied and is different, right? But they don't have the history of winning that Barca do have. I want to look at it in a different way. Like Valverde did well with Atletico Bilbao. When he was in Olympiacos in Greece, he also won, and that was great, And he's come to Barca, and he's had 2 seasons in order to have a crack at, let's face it, the main target that was winning the Champions League. He has not succeeded, all right? He's got the favor of Messi and the sort of the core strength part of the squad, and I get that. But, he's already had 2 goals, and, normally you say third time lucky, yeah, fine. But the way in which he failed to prepare the team psychologically, more than anything, for the Champions League decider last year and certainly this year, I think is utterly unacceptable and makes a mockery of everything that we stand for. And he has to go. Normally, people that have been listening to the pod for the last 2 years, they know that I normally will be more conservative. I normally will be more sort of given a chance. Of course, La Liga is important, blah, blah, blah. But I think the way in which we went out is terrible. And there has to be a change. Would Quique Setien do better than Valverde next year? why not? Why not? You know, he plays the right way of football. Valverde understands attacking football as well, but I think the creativity, the width, the 1-2s that Betis were doing with players of, with all due respect, far lesser quality, that was great to watch, you know. And you've got someone like Marc Bartra actually excelling at the center of defense, and you know, you've got people like Piqué or Umtiti or Lenglet and maybe the league next year. You know, that's the difference in quality that we're talking about here. And I would give Quique Setién a go for sure, you know. And there is no reason why Barca, with that coach and a couple of tweaks that we've been discussing here already, that they won't be able to win La Liga again next year. And then in the Champions League, with Messi motivated, with Dembélé hopefully away from injuries, and all the solid back and the transformational midfield once De Jong joins us, I think we've got every chance of winning in Europe again. But, you know, going back to the same coach that has failed so miserably and in such fashion over the last 2 years, I think it would be a mistake. So we need to change and give someone else a go.
Yeah, I think what we're running into, and then the more I think about this too, is the pragmatism of Valverde might yield results, but we're at a point where that approach has not won the Champions League, and in the same regard, again, there's coming a post-Messi, post-Busquets, post-PK era on the horizon, and you have to begin to play a certain way that Barcelona want to play. I mean, it's not just, again, the global fans, the people on the internet. And it's not that Barcelona were boring or that they were bad. I don't think that's what it is. I think that it was a pragmatic approach, that there were results garnered. Again, they won domestic cups. They dominated Real Madrid by more points in La Liga than they ever have. I mean, that's just success. And to me, success in the way it is not boring. They scored as many goals as they did in Pep Guardiola's first season, or just about that same amount in La Liga. They didn't hit 100 goals in that season. They didn't hit it now. If we remember, actually, the first season of Guardiola even, he was a little more pragmatic in the way. And the other difference, though, is he had Xavi and he had Iniesta, and he was truly building, you know, what we then came to see is the ideal model of what Barcelona will always be facing up to in terms of their style of play. Now, the reason for bringing somebody in would be that it would not be based on results. It would be giving Valverde basically one more chance to get one match right, and that's all it is. It's that one Champions League, that second leg, to get one match right, and you'd be giving him a third chance. But when you bring in a Quique Setién, or I even look at Rayo, who will most likely keep Paco Gémez, as they have no reason to get rid of him. They played pretty well, even though they were relegated. But Paco Gémez is the same thing where he doesn't do well with relegated clubs, but you think, you know, if he ever had the clay of a top side, what could that kind of guy do? And I have the same feeling about Quique Setién, that he could succeed if he had like the right clay to mold with, which, as you said, the depth of Betis is obviously not that of Barcelona, but I wonder if unfortunately in that situation where he had that kind of clay, if Barcelona would be stagnating right around the penalty box and just possessing, and then they would run into issues there. But again, these are all hypotheticals. Let's do one, Francesc, I think that both of us could rant about, but I'm going to try to keep as simple as possible. Alex says, what do you think about certain segments of the fan base actively rooting for Valencia this weekend with the thought that a loss would force Valverde out? And Francesc, I say it's nonsense. Do you think we need any more words than that?
Yeah, I think we do, actually.
Okay.
I think it is nonsense, but I also think it's embarrassing. There's a sentence in Spanish which is vergüenza ajena. Like, I'm embarrassed for people who feel like that. I don't think that if you support a club truly, and you are, because, you know, for me, supporting a club is more than just watching a football game and just rooting for the winning team. You know, you can never, ever, ever. It doesn't matter what the circumstances. Doesn't matter if it's going to get you, you know, your star player to join or leave, or your manager to be sacked. Anything like that is unacceptable. It's utterly embarrassing, and it's shameful that you would ever, for whatever reason, want your team to lose. You know, and especially a final. Like, what are we talking about here? You know, and that, it really makes my blood boil that there will be people that call themselves fans and want the team to lose. It's I'm lost for words, flabbergasted.
Yeah, I mean, I don't lose my mind when, and you can go over to Patreon and check out the match reviews. You know, when they draw with Eibar 2-2 in a league that's already done and dusted, you know, I'm not losing my mind. I'm not having a conniption fit. I think there's something to recognizing, and I always try to do this, especially in La Liga, if we want to say that it's just as good as the Premier League, then we have to trust that Barcelona even can be given a fight if they don't bring their best. And I think there is value in, if a team bests Barcelona, to be realistic and say that that's an okay thing that happens, but that's different than just accepting losing. And I think that's the point here, that I think Barcelona, as we said, should beat Valencia. But if Barcelona are not good enough, Valencia are a good side. They earned their right in the Copa del Rey final. They booked their ticket, and they're going to defeat Barcelona if they want it more. And especially when it comes down to these last few games of the season, what hurts the most, again, about Liverpool, about those kind of matches, was that Barcelona didn't want it as much. And Real Madrid's season went completely out of whack when, against Barcelona, without Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez had a field day against them in the fall, as we remember, because Barcelona clearly wanted it, and Real Madrid clearly didn't. It's that adage that Sid Lowe says that, we can go and break down tactics forever and ever and ever and say Valverde's pragmatic, this and this and this, but if a team doesn't want it on a particular day, then a quality side, a top 4 in the Liga team, is going to take it to them, and they're going to get the result. But I think, as you said, it's completely ludicrous to say that you hope that Barcelona miss out on this, because, again, as I'm going through this Copa del Rey history again, yes, it's been 30 different titles, but that's 30 different titles over 110 years. So really, in the span of a fan's lifetime, it's what, 12, maybe, 12, 13, 14. Obviously, it was more scant, 100 years ago, like right at the beginning. But, you're talking 12, 13 Copa del Rey titles. So to expect them every single year, and to expect any title any single year, is something that I think Messi has made us expect them. That's not me thinking. I think it's a fact that Messi wins. That's what he does. And so Messi equals titles. And as much as we're trying to stockpile Scrooge McDuck as many titles as we can, when it comes at a time after Messi, there is going to have to be almost a complete reevaluation of what Barca's goals are, of what we want Barca to be, and all these different things. And Roscoe's question here, do you think we're too optimistic about players being sold to shake up the squad? Part of the reason why we believe that there needs to be shakeup is because I think Kevin Williams has always said when he comes on the show, the only issue that Barca have this season, other than, yes, a little bit of scoring depth behind Messi, is that they are getting a little old in the tooth. That's the big issue. That defense, PK was unbelievable this season. However, he is aging. Busquets has been caught out in ways that he never has before. And yes, he is only in his early 30s now, but regardless, he is going to age pretty quickly because there's a lot of deep runs. There's a lot of deep miles, as they say, on his legs. He is getting long in the tooth, even though his age might not be, because he has played a lot of high-pressure football. And the same goes for Messi. The same goes for Suarez. The core of the squad has aged, and there has to be some kind of shakeup. But for me, Francesc, answering this question first is that I seem to think that they're going to want to run this back, especially if Valverde stays. If Valverde stays, and I think so much of that core is still staying, I think Luis Suarez will still be the consummate starter next year, and they'll just bring in somebody to kind of service some time from him if they don't get Antoine Griezmann, but I think you might see less shakeup even than you think. The peripherals of Malcolm and Denis Suarez and Andre Gomes, those are going to be the names that are moving this summer.
Yeah, and if you think about it as well, you've got Ter Stegen who's going to start regardless. I would personally sell Silesen. He wants to go, so I would sell him for the best. Whatever offer is best for us, we just take it. Then in terms of good offer, it means the highest amount of money we can get. And I would promote a B team goalkeeper, just from La Masia.
Yeah.
Then
Peña's good. Iñaki Peña's good enough. I think for people who've watched him, he's good enough to be a backup. I mean, and then you could throw him in the fire. Absolutely, he's been good. He's been their top goalkeeper, Iñaki Peña. For the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years out of La Masia. That's how good Iñaki Peña is. He's a backup.
Yeah, and realistically, what is he going to play? He's going to play the Copa del Rey, right?
Yeah.
Well, that should be enough. There's people that want to throw away the Copa del Rey because they want to get rid of the manager and they want to spend money on a goalkeeper, when we need to promote the people that understand Barca, not just the system of play, which is incredibly important. It is what the club is and what the club stands for. So absolutely promote from within. From the right back, you've got Semedo and Sergio Roberto. I think the position's covered with them, especially the way they've done it this year. I would say Semedo, because of his better defensive predisposition and experience. I think he probably has the edge there, but Roberto is a very valid option. In the center, if you can get De Ligt, and that's a big if at the moment, obviously, because there's other teams at European stage trying to get him. But Lenglet and Piqué, they've been great. As I said before, I would sell Umtiti. I know a lot of people don't agree with this, but, it's my opinion. I think sell him, make the most of the money you can. On the left back, you've got Jordi Alba, who is the clear starter. I would personally, I know I mentioned Felipe Luis coming as a sort of free transfer, but I would personally just bring back Cucurella. He can absolutely do the job. He's been stellar this year in La Liga. He's one of the top assisters in his team, and he looks sharp against us. Not that you would decide on just one game, but he's been great and showed that at the big stage against us, he can perform. Then in midfield, you've got the young, bringing fresh blood. I think Busquets, he needs to be sort of phased out slowly but surely. I think that, obviously not get rid of him at all, but he needs to coach the newcomers, and that would be the young, in order to move things forward. I think Artur needs to have a more prevalent role than he has had this season. I think Vidal can't stay. I like the fire, determination, and resilience that he's brought to the team, and that, in a way, is what's been lacking in decisive moments. And then Aleñá needs to continue to grow, and I think Riqui Puig can be thrown into the mix as well. As I said before as well, Rakitic, I think, should be sold. If they can give us 55, 60 million euros, then we should thank him for his many years of service. But I don't think Rakitic is going to get any better. And if you are keeping Busquets, I think you can offload Rakitic. So there you go. Up front, Suarez, absolutely you have to keep, but you have to get a replacement. There has been lots of young names thrown into it. Maxi Gomez from Celta seems to be a realistic option. I know that Barca are already sort of looking towards acquiring him, and that would be a great move. Obviously, Messi, he's got 2-3 years max left with us, and he can continue to lead. And then hopefully Dembélé finds the magic wand and stops getting injured so often. Then Coutinho, I would sell. I think Coutinho has to go because, once the Camp Nou stops trusting you, and the way that he disrespected us as a crowd, I think is unacceptable. I don't think he's going to turn the situation around, and we need to shop him out and see who can give us the best offer. And as I said before, the most money, not necessarily wherever he wants to go. And then people are talking about Griezmann. Guys, I understand Griezmann is a great player. I understand Griezmann is a World Cup winner. I understand his goal also go for Atletico, but he was an absolute clown last summer. He disrespected our club. He laughed at us. I know from reports from inside the dressing room, the players are annoyed at him. People like, say, Piqué, that actually went through his documentary firm, his film crew firm, to make the decision, and then he turned around the last minute and spoiled it all. I know that he's been using the name of people like even Messi with the Atletico de Madrid, Simeone, Cerezo, top board people when he was justifying his exit, and that was absolute nonsense. Messi hasn't said a word either way, and that didn't sit down very well either. And once you are running a team, once you're running an organization, which I am doing in not my podcast job but my other job as well, you need to know about relationships, you need to know about trust, you need to know about respect. And Griezmann broke the trust, respect, and make a mockery of our players and our club. So I don't care how good he is at kicking a ball. I would absolutely not have him in my club. And that is the same reasoning for Neymar, by the way. People saying he should come back. He should absolutely not come back. He left us. He was great with us, very thankful, etc. But he would absolutely not come back because of the way that he treated the club. And, Barca's values, the La Masia values, the Johan Cruyff values, go beyond whether you can score goals or not. And I don't care whether Neymar and Griezmann are the best two players in the world, which obviously is not the case because that's not them. But even if they were, I wouldn't want them at my club because they go against what I believe in, and not just I, because I'm not really that important, is what my club, my people, my community, our community stand for, and that is not what Griezmann and Neymar represent with their behavior. So absolutely not welcome.
Yeah, it's funny when it comes to Griezmann, it's almost as if, I'm fine with not having him, and if he has to come, then I'll just get used to it, and we'll just, he'll immediately slot in the starting 11, and we'll figure out things from there. So it is a funny thing that I have a potential, starting 11 player who I, take it or leave it. But as far as the big guys, again, this is my instinct. Again, don't put any money down on it, but my instinct is that Rakitic doesn't leave and Coutinho does. Coutinho, I think there's no way that he returns, but I think, especially if Valverde's back, then Rakitic is the package deal. Well, we have one from Rick before we go back to the main first team and talk about a little more about La Liga. Rick asked, what do you think about the progress that Barca Femení has made? And this is, yes, they did get shellacked by Lyon in the Champions League, but Lyon have also won more than half the Champions League trophies this decade. That's just how dominant the Lyon side is. They won, I believe it's 13 of their own domestic titles in France. That Lyon side has the female Ballon d'Or winner, and they have just tons of depth all over the field, and they're an unbelievable side. So losing to Lyon in the Champions League final means that you were basically the best team in all of women's football, because you don't really count just the team that would have dominated anybody by that scoreline who would have made the final. So how much progress have the Barcelona Femení made? To answer this quickly, Rick, is that the 2012-2013 season was their first time participating in the Champions League. They have had a run of second in the league, so hoping that they can overtake Atletico Madrid finally and get back to there. But the fact that, they can dominate by, I think it was 8-1 was the one scoreline this season, or 7-1, whatever it was, over Madrid CFF, which is not affiliated with Real Madrid, but is the Madrid side. It tells you that Barcelona are trying to put money into that sporting project. And as I've said, with Lecky Martins and Tony Dugan and Kiri Amraoui coming in this season, they have a lot of names that are going to start to sell shirts. They finally were able to sell shirts with Stanley on in the store, so people are going to start buying those. And they're even expanding, trying to put a team in the NWSL. I don't know if that's going to happen, but either way, expanding that brand as well, growing women's football. And this is a Barcelona podcast. Mainly, we do talk about the men's team. That's what people care about. I mean, Francesc 2 weeks ago talked about it, that people aren't really paying attention to them, but I do. I hopefully say that they don't pay attention to them yet, because, again, I think a ton of people watched that final with them in it. It was available on YouTube. And as I've said about La Masia as well, people care about Barcelona. They care about the whole brand. And while they're not going to be yelling about it on Twitter, they're not going to be dedicating profile pictures to certain players. If you watch it, or people love Barca, if you put it on the internet and it exists and it's available to people, they will watch it. And I think the Femení, if they are on if they can continue to make Champions League finals, continue to be in the big matches, I'm excited to see their growth. I think it's just exponential growth from here. So what do you think, Francesc?
Well, I think that they have been tremendous this year. I think the progress has been remarkable based on the facts that you just gave. And I think they are a great example for young girls. I mean, I've got two little girls at home, and I did put the final on for them. They didn't quite understand what was going on, but I think it is remarkable that they got that far. And I wish that they continue to close the gap to men's in order to be as important. But, as I said before, they're not at the moment, but hopefully that will change, because either it's Barca Femení or the basketball team or the handball team, it's all the same club, and that's what makes us more than a club, not just the football men's section. And it's good to see them succeeding, even though they didn't win in the end.
Well, let's transition back into the men's first team. Question from Zach. Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid are both expected to spend big this summer. Which team will pose a realistic threat to Barcelona's title defense, and how specifically should we reinforce for the league? And this goes back to the early point I made, that Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid have a ton of overhaul coming, more so than Barcelona. They're going to be spending big money. And this kind of goes to the question of, did Barcelona deserve to win the Liga this season, even with those two completely faltering? And, in previous seasons, if they were even a shell of what these two, clubs in Madrid were, Barcelona would have had a much more difficult time winning the Liga than they did. But I think that he asked which team. I think Real Madrid, our eternal rivals, are always going to be the ones who are going to pose the bigger threat. But in the same respect, Atletico Madrid are still going to try to give it the best try. And over the last 4 seasons, Atletico Madrid have been the one to worry about, not Real Madrid.
I think the team to worry about is Barca. I think what we need to focus on is reinforcing our weaknesses, reinforcing our own squad, and making sure that we are as good as we need to be. It goes back to what I said before when I went through all the players. If we've got the squad in place, it doesn't quite matter what Madrid do or what Atletico Madrid do, we will beat them. We need to have 14, 15 starters, like in a way we have had this season, But obviously, we need to be resilient, we need to be focused, and we need to know that any given time, a competition could go as we saw in Liverpool. So I think Barca are their own worst enemy. And as long as we reinforce ourselves and we have a coach that can perform, can motivate, and can engage our players in the way that Valverde just couldn't do at the key moment of the season this year, I think we will win La Liga again and we can challenge for the treble, regardless of who Madrid or Atletico or Valencia or anybody else signs.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good way to answer that, Francesc. Just because, all the news is going to be, and fine, let Zidane and Gareth Bale fight the whole time. And I think when it comes to offloading players like Felipe Coutinho this summer, I don't want it to be as messy as that situation happening at Real Madrid. And I think what's happening with Real Madrid is the locker room has, become a little bit divided in certain places. And obviously when Zidane came back in, it's been odd to see even Keylor Navas kind of be pushed to the peripheral and leaving the club now. Something that, he's one of the few Real Madrid players that have been, I guess you'd say, respected by those of us on the Blaugrana side of the aisle. But I think I would agree with that Barcelona need to continue to shore up the squad. And, La Liga will continue to be won by players number 14, 15, 16, 17. It's what you kind of said at the start when looking at the depth of the team. If Carlos Alenya takes that big step up, I mean, that's how Man City is dominating England at the moment. That's how they just won the FA Cup, because their guys on the peripheral like Phil Foden, that teenage midfielder, he took a step forward and he could be trusted in those matches. And I think something I'd love to see next season, irrespective of the league, that there are certain matches where even with talking about, yes, Miranda did struggle this season at left back, and it was a point where he couldn't really be trusted in those kind of situations. And by situations, I just mean regular Copa del Rey or La Liga situations. But I think there has to come a day of reckoning for Barcelona at the moment with promoting youth again, that Alenya is going to have to start, even bigger matches. He's going to have to start against a Sevilla every now and again. It's going to have to happen for the club to continue to try to win on all accounts. He's going to have to get a start in an important match. Yeah.
But the key with Alanya is what you said in the previous pod. He has to start alongside Messi and Suarez and people of that caliber. You can't put all of your, in a way, second unit together, because then in a way, then it's not the blind leading the blind.
Right.
You know what I mean, right?
Yep,
so
100%.
It is being able to feed off other people, being able to be challenged by others, and being able to associate with them so you can elevate your own game. And it absolutely needs to be gradual. And that went wrong this season, and it needs to be better.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to tattoo on my face actually this offseason. Puig has never played with Messi yet. And that's the whole point, is that I want, as we've said, we want rotation, but rotation happens with just 2 or 3 players. And that has been, for all the players that have debuted, Valverde now has, as we expected when he was hired, Francesc. I remember you and I talking about this very thing, basically in the when our podcast was still just a little baby and we were getting it started. It was starting to learn how to walk, and we were talking about when Valverde was coming in for Luis Enrique that the big thing about Valverde was how much youth he had to form and had to debut and had to work with at Athletic Bilbao, just because of the circumstances of that club and the rules that they have about their best players in their academy. And when Valverde has come here, he has debuted a ton of Barca B players. But I think the question I asked on the Patreon, and this is the final question I'll wrap up. This is a question from me, Francesc, that I'll wrap up with, is under Valverde, how many players have actually improved and progressed and have become players that you trust? I mean, because I don't know. I think Lenglet was just as good at Sevilla. We just didn't see it. Artur was already pretty good, and that's why he fit so seamlessly like a glove, because this is basically the player he was when he came in. So my question for you then is, what players have actually gotten better under Valverde?
Sergi Roberto, maybe?
I agree with that. Yeah?
That's it.
Yeah. Again, that wasn't a question without an answer, but...
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Sergi Roberto. And that's really sad, because I do remember recording our episode 2 or 3, and it was precisely that. And I think Valverde has disappointed in the fact that he's been so conservative and so concerned about his own job that actually he hasn't moved our players forward and he hasn't promoted well enough. And that is a shame.
Yeah, I think that's the expectation. I think instead of just, again, people are upset about what's happening on the field, but I think that's actually my biggest indictment of Valverde would be that I'm happy with the results, but in the same respect, I think it is possible to get all those results plus getting players better and improving players, and that's what I want to see. But I think we're going to continue to try to improve, and having you on the show, Francesc, is always a big help to improve the quality for our listeners as we also bring in a few other guests. And as we have the Copa del Rey final this week, again, there's a YouTube video coming out on that in the next few days, but I've got a lot planned on the summer, some special stuff we're working on, and some evergreen stuff, as you will, some long-form stuff that is going to fill your ears during the summertime. As some of you might be watching international stuff that we'll talk about, but the Barcelona podcast will continue over the summertime. We'll just be doing a few special little things, and of course we'll have all the transfer news and all that stuff, and depending on who signs, we'll deep dives on all those players. But Francesc, thanks for joining the show.
Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure.
And thank you to listeners for tuning in. Again, you can tap in your app and check out the show notes to subscribe. You can find us on social media too. We're on Twitter at the Barcelona Pod, or at HiltonD13 for me, and on Instagram at the Barcelona Pod. Our closed Facebook group is tbpod.link/group for deeper dives and discussions. You can also help us on Patreon to continue making these shows. That's tbpod.link/Patreon. That's where we do the match reviews. So you heard Francesc talk about Cucurella this week and Alvaro Ruiz. We talked about a little last week, but if you really want my opinion about Cucurella and Alvaro Ruiz and the deeper dives, like 10, 15 minutes about these matches, that's over at Patreon. You can get in for, I think it's $1, $3, whatever it is. It also helps us make more shows and helps improve the YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. So again, that's the final summer plea for that. As I said, we're also on YouTube now at the Barcelona Podcast. Check us out and hit that subscription button. So thanks for listening to the Barcelona Podcast. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Forza Barça.
Forza.